Subscribe right now. Press the bell for political carnage. The spotlights blazed across the Turning Point USA platform as fireworks exploded in coordinated bursts. Rock music blared through enormous speakers, and Vice President J.D. Vance walked toward the microphone with the confidence of someone who thought he was invincible. What was meant to be a triumphant display of conservative unity was about to transform into the scene of the most catastrophic political self-immolation in contemporary American history, sparked by a racist assault that would reveal not just Vance's true character, but the sinister truth about how he actually became Vice President of the United States. The Phoenix Convention Center hummed with the excitement of thousands of young conservatives who had assembled for what organizers advertised would be the most significant American cafeist in the movement's existence. Behind Vance, giant screens projected his name in gold lettering, while confetti launchers prepared to mark what was intended to be a moment of Republican supremacy. Instead, the platform was prepared for a political annihilation that would start with two words: street girl. Hey everybody. Before we explore the most savage political devastation of 2025, hit that subscribe button immediately, because you definitely do not want to miss these instances when racist assaults backfire in the most dramatic way imaginable. We're about to see how two words can terminate a VP career and uncover the most disturbing secrets of American politics. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever witnessed someone obliterate their own career this thoroughly on live broadcast? Vice President J.D. Vance stepped onto that Phoenix platform feeling untouchable. The 41-year-old former venture capitalist had accomplished one of the most unlikely political metamorphoses in American history, transforming from Trump opponent to devoted follower to vice president in less than 10 years. His best-selling book, Hillbilly Elegy, had turned him into a media sensation. His political transformation had secured Trump's confidence, and his rise to the vice presidency had established him as the expected successor to the MAGA movement. But what Vance seemingly failed to grasp was how completely his political brand relied on fabricated authenticity that could be destroyed by anyone prepared to highlight the contradictions between his meticulously crafted persona and verifiable reality. His Appalachian working-class image had always been somewhat fake. He had devoted more time in elite organizations than struggling communities, but he had successfully preserved the act for years through calculated storytelling and media control. The subject of his coming assault represented everything that his phony authenticity couldn't survive. Real political skill backed by genuine credentials, authentic ties to the communities she served, and most threateningly, the viral communication abilities that had already demolished multiple Republican political careers through tactical precision rather than fabricated rage. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had become famous among political watchers, not just for her viral clashes with Republican adversaries, but for the systematic preparation and intellectual dominance that made those moments achievable. Unlike politicians who depended on rehearsed talking points or emotional pleas, she'd established her reputation on crushing factual examination delivered with the kind of genuine confidence that couldn't be created through political consulting. If you are discovering authentic political communication right now, press that like button and make sure you subscribe, because we examine exactly how these career-destroying moments emerge from arrogance and racist presumptions. Comment below. Do you think J.D. Vance knew he was about to assault the wrong person? The background to this clash revealed a tactical error that would prove deadly to Vance's political reputation. As Crockett's Senate campaign gathered strength and her viral instances continued, creating enormous media coverage, Republican advisors had seemingly concluded that assaulting her personally would be more successful than confronting her considerable policy understanding or verified legislative accomplishments. This strategy reflected the same establishment reasoning that had repeatedly undervalued Crockett's political talents, the belief that personal assaults could weaken someone whose authenticity and ability had already been consistently proven in high-stakes political settings. Republican politicians and conservative media personalities had attempted similar approaches against her previously, only to discover their assaults transformed into viral instances that elevated rather than harmed her political position. What made Vance's coming assault especially risky, both for his subject and ultimately for himself, was its overtly racial nature. The street girl language represented precisely the kind of encoded terminology that had become fundamental to Republican messaging about Democratic politicians of color. intended to reduce their reputation, while preserving plausible deniability about racist intention. But Vance had seemingly failed to examine how Crockett had previously managed such assaults. Rather than becoming protective or permitting Republican framing to control the dialogue, she had established a pattern of revealing the tactical reasons behind personal assaults, while proving exactly the kinds of intellectual and professional talents that made those assaults seem ridiculous rather than successful. The platform was prepared for a clash between fabricated political persona and genuine political skill, between someone whose career relied on preserving fictional stories and someone whose power came from verified reality. The result was never truly in question. Only the particular method through which Vance would demolish his own reputation remained to be established. Share this video with everybody right now, because what occurs next is political arrogance meeting crushing reality in the most public way imaginable. Press that share button and inform your friends they need to witness this total self-destruction. Comment below. Were you stunned by how racist this assault became? As Vance neared the microphone, the audience of young conservatives burst into excited applause, anticipating another display of the populist authenticity that had become fundamental to his political brand. The pyrotechnic presentation and rock music entrance had generated precisely the kind of show that MAGA gatherings were recognized for. All spectacle and theater intended to create emotional connection rather than meaningful political conversation. And Jasmine Crockett. Vance started, his voice holding the scornful tone that had become typical of Republican assaults on Democratic politicians who endangered their electoral chances. The crowd's atmosphere shifted as they understood that their vice president was about to begin the kind of personal assault that had become standard at conservative assemblies. "Oh, Jasmine Crockett," he went on, the repetition indicating someone enjoying what he seemingly thought would be a crushing political moment. The break was obviously planned for theatrical impact, providing his audience time to expect the assault while strengthening his own confidence for what was intended to be a career-defining destruction of a rising Democratic star. The record is clear. He announced with the confidence of someone who seemingly thought his vice presidential position gave him permission to make factual assertions without supporting proof. This introduction indicated that Vance intended to concentrate on meaningful criticism of Crockett's political work. But what came next exposed a total lack of actual policy disputes or legislative criticism. She desires to be a senator, though her street girl persona is about as authentic as her nails. The racist signal was instant and clear. The expression street girl persona merged multiple layers of encoded terminology intended to reduce a black woman's political reputation through implications that her genuine self-presentation was somehow unsuitable for serious political position. The mention to her nails contributed an overtly misogynistic component, assaulting her looks rather than confronting her considerable political accomplishments. Political communication specialists instantly understood the intentional nature of Vance's language selection. Street girl was an unintentional wording. It was deliberately chosen terminology intended to trigger racial prejudices while preserving enough plausible deniability to prevent explicit charges of racism. The inclusion of appearance-based assaults focusing on her nails represented a traditional mixture of racist and misogynistic speech that Republican politicians had progressively used against Democratic women of color. The tactical reasoning behind such assaults exposed the intellectual emptiness of modern conservative political messaging. Rather than confronting Crockett's considerable legislative history, policy knowledge, or verified credentials, Vance had selected to assault her authenticity and looks, precisely the kind of strategy that had repeatedly failed when employed against politicians with the abilities essential to deliver crushing responses. What made Vance's terminology especially harmful to his own reputation was its exposure of the beliefs and biases that directed his political reasoning. The implication that Crockett's persona was created while at the same time assaulting her looks indicated someone who perceived black women's political involvement through the perspective of racial and gender prejudices rather than meaningful policy factors. People, we are seeing racism and sexism at the greatest levels of American government. If you are not subscribed to this channel yet, you are missing examination that reveals you precisely how these assaults expose character and eventually fail. Press that subscribe button and leave a comment. How did you feel listening to the Vice President employ this terminology? The crowd's response exposed the desired impact of Vance's assault. Excited applause and laughter indicated an audience that valued precisely the kind of encoded, racist messaging that had become fundamental to conservative political approach. For them, Vance's assault represented confirmation of their beliefs about democratic politicians of color and verification that their vice president held their biases. But what neither Vance nor his audience seemingly comprehended was how thoroughly this assault would fail when Crockett had the chance to reply. The racist and misogynistic terminology that created applause in a conservative echo chamber would sound quite different when replayed to wider audiences, especially when compared with Crockett's genuine credentials and political accomplishments. More significantly, Vance had just given Crockett with the ideal arrangement for the kind of crushing response that had made her famous among political watchers. By assaulting her authenticity and credentials, he had exposed himself to precisely the kind of factual contrast that would reveal the created nature of his own political persona. The tactical error was clear to anyone acquainted with Crockett's political approach. She excelled in confrontational instances where adversaries gave obvious examples of their character and judgment. Vance's racist assault would provide her numerous angles for reply. The encoded terminology itself, the misogynistic components, the absence of meaningful policy criticism, and most threateningly, for him, the chance to contrast her genuine political growth with his verified history of political opportunism. As reports of Vance's assault expanded beyond the Phoenix Convention Center, political watchers instantly understood the scale of his tactical mistake. Conservative media figures might praise the assault in their echo chamber, but wider audiences would perceive something quite different. A sitting vice president employing racist terminology to assault an accomplished black congresswoman whose credentials and accomplishments were publicly verified and rarely confirmable. The difference couldn't have been more obvious or more harmful to Republican political messaging. Here was someone whose complete political career had been constructed on genuine relationships with the community she served, being assaulted by someone whose political metamorphosis had demanded abandoning his early positions and embracing whatever speech seemed politically beneficial. Oh my God. Are you perceiving how flawlessly this arranges for catastrophe? Subscribe instantly, because we're about to see the precise moment when racist assaults meet crushing political reality. Comment below. Did you think J.D. Vance grasped who he was assaulting? This is political suicide in actual time. When reports of Vance's street girl assault reached Crockett's team, their reply approach was instant and crushing. Rather than regarding this as a crisis to be controlled, they understood it as a chance to prove precisely the kind of intellectual and moral dominance that made such assaults seem ridiculous rather than successful. The occasion for Crockett's reply couldn't have been more ideal for maximum viral effect. A live broadcast interview gave the perfect setting for her to prove the calm professionalism that contrasted sharply with Vance's inflammatory speech, while guaranteeing that her response would be recorded and distributed across social media channels. First of all, he is attempting to provoke his base. Crockett started her voice holding the relaxed confidence that had made her congressional clash so successful. Rather than replying emotionally to the racist assault, she was instantly analyzing the tactical reasons behind Vance's terminology with a kind of analytical accuracy that distinguished genuine political skill from reactive theater. Because right now, we understand that no matter if we're examining in deep red Tennessee, Mississippi, or Georgia, we understand that we're moving no less than 10 points, she went on, positioning Vance's assault in the wider framework of Republican electoral weakness that made such frantic approaches essential. This tactical examination exposed precisely why Vance's assault had been such a disastrous error. Rather than confronting an unprepared adversary who might be harmed by personal assaults, he had focused on someone whose political intelligence permitted her to instantly reframe his racist terminology as proof of Republican panic rather than valid criticism. But Crockett was just beginning. Her reply to the racist street girl description would prove the distinction between someone whose political credentials were genuine and confirmable versus someone whose complete career relied on preserving fictional stories about his background and reasons. The reality that he stated, "I have a quote-unquote street girl persona," she went on, emphasizing the encoded nature of Vance's terminology while preparing to dismantle the beliefs behind it. "I am apologetic, but anybody that you speak to understands my credentials. They understand that I've attended school. They understand that I am educated. The difference she was creating was crushing and would prove deadly to any effort to reduce her credentials or authenticity. While Vance had assaulted her with racist prejudices, she was replying with verified facts about her educational background, profession, accomplishments, and political growth that could be confirmed by anyone interested in genuine information rather than biased beliefs. I never attempted to present some fabricated story about where I originated from, she included. And this statement would prove to be one of the most harmful components of her reply. Without specifically naming Vance, she was emphasizing the fundamental contradiction of his political career. Someone who had created an Appalachian working-class persona despite investing most of his adult life in elite organizations was assaulting her authenticity. This is amazing political approach occurring in actual time. Press that like button if you are impressed by this degree of tactical communication and share this video because everybody needs to witness how genuine power demolishes racist assaults. What do you think was the most effective part of her reply so far? The authenticity subject that Crockett was establishing would prove to be the ideal weapon against Vance's created political brand. But at the conclusion of the day, I am who I am, and I am genuine, she announced with a kind of calm confidence that couldn't be created through political consulting or media preparation. And that is truly what they are scared of, is my authenticity, because it connects genuinely with every single American, whether they're a Texan or not. This statement captured the fundamental dynamic that made Vance's assault so tactically foolish. In attempting to reduce her through racist prejudices, he had unintentionally emphasized precisely the characteristics that made her politically threatening to Republican electoral chances, real ties to the communities she served, and genuine communication that connected across demographic and geographical boundaries. But the most crushing component of Crockett's reply was still to arrive. Having established the authenticity difference and analyzed the tactical reasons behind Vance's assault, she was preparing to provide the kind of factual statement that would essentially damage his political validity and reputation. It connects genuinely that I am battling for actual everyday people, she went on, establishing the policy difference that Vance had prevented by concentrating on personal assaults rather than meaningful political disputes. And instead of discussing policy, when you are discussing the record is clear, baby, let's discuss your record. The challenge was direct and crushing. Rather than protecting herself against racist assaults, Crockett was moving the dialogue to precisely the kind of factual contrast that revealed the vulnerability of Vance's political standing. If he desired to examine records and credentials, she was ready to make that contrast in depth. What arrived next would become one of the most referenced political statements of 2025. A single phrase that captured the essential illegitimacy of Vance's vice presidential standing while revealing the violent extremism that had defined the Trump administration's strategy to democratic governance. Because the only explanation you are the vice president is because the current president attempted to have his last vice president murdered. The studio became totally silent. The statement was historically correct, politically crushing, and morally unanswerable. Vance's rise to the vice presidency had happened directly because Mike Pence's refusal to overturn the 2020 election had made him a subject for murder by Trump followers on January 6, 2021. The cry, "Hang Mike Pence," had resounded through the Capitol structure as rioters built gallows and searched for the vice president. People, this is the precise moment when everything transforms forever. Subscribe immediately if you desire to witness how one phrase can obliterate a political career. Leave a comment. Were you stunned by how directly she addressed January 6th? Press that share button because this is unprecedented political honesty. The consequences of Crockett's declaration were enormous and unavoidable. She had linked Vance's current standing directly to the violent extremism of January 6th. Implying that his vice presidency was the direct consequence of Trump's effort to have Mike Pence murdered for refusing to join in the attempted overthrow. The historical evidence supported her statement totally, but no politician had earlier declared the link so directly or devastatingly. The verified proof supporting Crockett's statement was massive and undeniable. Video recording from January 6th displayed Trump followers crying, "Hang Mike Pence," while building makeshift gallows outside the Capitol structure. Secret Service recordings exposed the real fear for Pence's life as rioters arrived within 40 feet of his position. Trump's own declarations on social media had promoted the crowd's hostility toward his vice president, posting criticism of Pence even as the riot was continuing. Pence's refusal to join in Trump's plan to overturn the election outcomes had made him a subject for murder by the very followers Trump had gathered. His dedication to constitutional duties over personal devotion had directly resulted in his political banishment from the MAGA movement and his substitution by someone prepared to prioritize Trump's approval over democratic organization. The link between Pence's near murder and Vance's rise was both historically correct and politically crushing. Vance had established himself as Trump's most devoted follower, precisely because he grasped that devotion rather than ability or constitutional dedication was the main credential Trump appreciated in potential running mates. His choice as vice president represented the victory of obsequiousness over principle, opportunism over honesty. The difference between Vance's racist assault and Crockett's historically based reply couldn't have been more obvious. He had depended on encoded terminology and personal insults while she had given factual examination of the violent extremism that had brought him to authority. The moral and intellectual dominance of her standing was undeniable and would prove difficult for Republican operatives to oppose through traditional damage management approaches. Let's discuss credentials, Crockett went on, advancing her benefit while Vance's followers struggled to absorb the consequences of her January 6th statement. Let's discuss who has truly been battling for people way before she ever competed for position. The credentials contrast that came next would further obliterate any effort to imply that Vance's credentials were greater than hers, whether it was in the courtroom or if it was in the streets, guaranteeing those that were out there desiring to practice their constitutional right to assemble and demonstrate injustices. I was defending pro bono people that were getting detained as they were out in the streets. This disclosure of her legal work defending protesters emphasized precisely the kind of genuine dedication to civil rights and constitutional securities that contrasted sharply with Vance's opportunistic political career. While he had modified his political standings based on electoral calculations, she had regularly battled for the same principles throughout her professional growth. The tactical genius of her reply was becoming progressively obvious to political watchers witnessing the clash develop. Rather than permitting Vance's racist assault to control the dialogue, she had restructured the complete conversation around questions of authenticity, credentials, and political validity that benefited her standing totally. So listen, I don't have time for him and their games. She finished with the kind of scornful confidence that indicated someone totally unintimidated by assaults from the supposed greatest levels of American government. They are frightened, and they should be frightened. The psychological dynamic she was creating was crushing to Republican political messaging. Rather than presenting herself as a victim of unjust assaults, she was establishing Vance and his supporters as frantic politicians whose dependence on racist terminology exposed their fear of her expanding political influence and genuine ties to voters. Before we proceed with this amazing examination, make sure you are subscribed because we analyze every aspect of these career-defining political instances. Press that subscribe button and leave a comment. Do you think Vance understood how severely he miscalculated? This is political devastation at its best. The instant aftermath of Crockett's reply exposed the total scale of Vance's tactical catastrophe. Within minutes of her January 6th statement, clips started distributing across social media channels at extraordinary speed. The hashtag #HangLikePence started trending as users linked her declaration to the verified history of Trump followers' assassination cries during the Capitol riot. Conservative media sources found themselves in the difficult standing of protecting Vance's racist assault while confronting Crockett's historically correct statement about the violent extremism that had raised him to the vice presidency. Some tried to assert that she was being unjust or inflammatory, but the verified proof of the January 6th events made such arguments seem ridiculous rather than convincing. The difference between the two politicians' strategies to this clash gave a perfect case examination in genuine versus created political communication. Vance had depended on racist signals intended to attract his base's biases, while Crockett had replied with factual examination that revealed the moral and political vulnerability of his standing. More harmful for Vance, her reply had restructured the complete dialogue from personal assaults to essential questions about political validity that he couldn't respond without acknowledging the violent extremism that had brought him to authority. The Hang Mike Pence cries weren't challenged historical facts. They were verified components of the January 6th Capitol riot that had been fundamental to Trump's attempted overthrow. Political fundraising information exposed the instant effect of the clash on Democratic excitement and Republican discouragement. Dollar contributions to Democratic candidates increased by 280% in the 24 hours after Crockett's reply, with many contributors particularly referencing the January 6th reference as their reason for donating. Republican fundraising, oppositely, displayed instant declines, as even conservative contributors communicated discomfort with Vance's racist terminology and the successful reply it had created. The event also affected how other Republican politicians neared potential clashes with Crockett and other Democratic politicians of color. The instruction was obvious. Personal assaults that might create applause in conservative echo chambers could fail dramatically when focused on adversaries who possess the abilities and understanding essential to reveal the assaulter's own weaknesses. For congressional historians, the clash represented a turning point in the continuing transformation of American political conversation. Crockett's direct recognition of the January 6th violence in reply to racist assaults indicated a new preparedness among Democratic politicians to face the extremism that had become fundamental to Republican political approach. Share this examination with everybody who needs to comprehend how genuine political skill defeats racist assaults. Press that share button and inform your friends they need to witness this masterclass in political communication. Comment below what was your favorite part of Jasmine's reply. The wider consequences of this viral clash reached far beyond the instant political harm to Vance's reputation. Crockett's reply had proven how genuine political skill could transform apparent vulnerabilities being focused by racist assaults into tactical benefits that revealed the moral and intellectual emptiness of the assaulters. Law schools and political science programs instantly started including the exchange into coursework examining successful political speech under hostile circumstances, tactical communication in high-pressure settings, and the success of authenticity versus created persona in modern political conversation. The street girl assault and its consequences also became fundamental to conversations about the transformation of Republican political approach and the growing dependence on encoded racist terminology that could be rapidly revealed and transformed against assaulters when they confronted adversaries with the abilities and understanding essential to give successful replies. Perhaps most importantly, the event emphasized how the verified history of January 6th persisted to give Democratic politicians with effective ammunition against Republicans whose political careers had been improved by the violent extremism of that day. Crockett's statement about Vance's rise to the vice presidency created a model for linking current Republican political standings to the attempted overthrow that had characterized Trump's final days in position. For Crockett personally, the clash gave another proof of her exceptional capability to transform Republican assaults into viral instances that improved rather than harmed her political position. Her Senate campaign reported enormous increases in volunteer registrations and small dollar contributions after the exchange, while polling displayed considerable improvements in her name awareness and favorability scores across demographic groups. The authenticity subject that had been fundamental to her reply connected especially powerfully with voters who had grown tired by the creative personas and tactical positioning that defined much of modern political communication. Her preparedness to recognize her background honestly while emphasizing Vance's verified history of political opportunism gave an obvious difference that benefited genuine representation over tactical theater. 3 weeks after the turning point clash, polling information exposed the lasting harm to Vance's political position among key demographic groups. His favorability scores among suburban women had decreased by 18 points, while his position among independent voters displayed considerable decline that worried Republican advisors about the 2028 electoral consequences. This is insane political psychology occurring in actual time. Press that like button if you are witnessing this total career devastation. Share this video, because everybody needs to witness what occurs when racist assaults meet genuine political skill. What do you think this means for Vance's political future? More concerning for Vance, internal Republican polling allegedly displayed that his assault on Crockett had created considerable excitement among Democratic voters who perceived the exchange as proof that their party was finally prepared to face Republican extremism directly rather than through diplomatic terminology that concealed the stakes involved. The event also affected wider Democratic messaging approach, with party leaders observing how Crockett's direct recognition of the January 6th violence had proven more successful than careful strategies that prevented facing Republican extremism overtly. Her proof that genuine communication could be more effective than focus group examined. Moderation gave a model for other Democratic politicians confronting similar assaults. For the conservative movement more widely, the clash emphasized the dangers involved in assaulting politicians, whose genuine credentials and vital communication abilities made them capable of crushing responses. Vance's experience indicated that the racist and misogynistic speech that created applause at conservative gatherings could fail dramatically when employed against adversaries who possess the intellectual and rhetorical talents essential to reveal the assaulter's weaknesses. Perhaps most significantly, the exchange proved how the verified history of Republican extremism, especially the January 6th events, persisted to give effective ammunition for Democratic politicians prepared to recognize those facts directly rather than through indirect terminology that concealed their moral and political importance. The metamorphosis of Vance's intended assault into Crockett's tactical benefit gave perfect proof of how modern political dynamics benefit genuine skill over created theater, factual examination over emotional pleas, and real credentials over opportunistic positioning. As the 2026 election cycle advanced, one conclusion became progressively obvious. J.D. Vance's effort to reduce Jasmine Crockett through racist terminology had instead given her with the ideal setting to prove precisely the kind of genuine political skill and tactical reasoning that traditional politicians repeatedly undervalued to their own considerable harm. The expression street girl had been intended as a racist signal intended to reduce a black woman's political reputation. Instead, it had become the arrangement for one of the most crushing political replies in contemporary American history, revealing the violent extremism and political opportunism that had brought Vance to authority while emphasizing the genuine credentials and moral clarity that made Crockett's political rise both unavoidable and completely merited. All right, everybody. That is the total breakdown of how J.D. Vance's racist street girl assault triggered the most crushing political reply about January 6th MVP validity in contemporary history. What is your opinion on this amazing clash? Leave your thoughts in the comments immediately. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this detailed examination, and don't forget to subscribe because we analyze every viral political instance that reveals the truth about American politics. Share this with anyone who needs to witness how genuine political skill obliterates racist assaults. Note asterisk the genuine event happened recently, December 2025, involving a real comment by J. Vance at Turning Point USA Cafeist and Jasmine Crockett's sharp reply in an interview and on social media. However, many details in this video script, such as enormous polling changes, career, ending harm, fundraising, increases of 280%, widespread trending hashtags, academic, adoption, and long-term favorability decreases are exaggerated or created for theatrical impact, as no such widespread consequences has been reported in reliable sources as of now.